All right, everyone. If all went well, we should be live on Substack right now. I do not know how to verify this, so um, hopefully, hopefully it's working. Um, Today we are going to do a little experiment. Um, we're going to figure out if we can build better bridge components. Better bridge components in a way that maybe we don't have to write anything besides Ruby. Right now, for bridge components, we have to write stimulus, iOS code, Android code, HTML code, all the wired up. But what if we could just build components that render from Ruby directly? So let's talk about where this came from. So native PHP, a really cool project, brings brings essentially Laravel, which is kind of like Rails for PHP, to iOS and Android. And what you do is you write PHP and you render native stuff. Very similar, and there's a web view in the middle, kind of rendering out the web content. But this just launched October 26th, so just a few days ago. Coming in version 2 is going to be real native components powered by Blade, which is their ERB in a sense. So what happens is that they can write something like this. This is what our ERB would look like. A native fab or a floating action button, and then give it some properties, an icon, a size, container. And then what happens is that the native PHP client reads this in some magic and renders out a floating action button, that little button in the bottom right of the screen, for you without having to do anything. So I want to see if we can replicate this by building on top of Hotwire Native. And we're going to do that we're going to come up with some goals here, right? So our Better Bridge Components goals, we have, the first goal is that we want to write Ruby. We're good at Ruby. We want to write Ruby and some Rails. Like, we don't want to write any other JavaScript. We don't want to write any iOS code, any Android code. I want all of that to be abstracted away into just writing Ruby. Like, I want to just write Ruby there. And we want to render fully native components, UI components. We don't want to do any like rendering a tab bar with HTML or a pop-up with Bootstrap or something. We want to render the same stuff we're already rendering on iOS and Android, but with rendering it out from Ruby. So what we're going to do here is I have a little demo app spun up, and we're going to create the high-level API first, right? So what I want to do in the body is like render native tabs. That's what I want to see in my HTML, and that's going to come from, we're going to open up maybe a Hotwire native helper here. And this is going to define that method for us. And that's kind of just the wrapper that we will have in our HTML, because I'm going to want to be writing a huge component thing in, over here. So what this is going to do is this is going to render a Hotwire native tab bar. That's what I want, right? And then this is going to take in, thank you, calendar. This is going to take in an array of tabs. So here we're going to have an array of tabs that will probably look pretty similar to what we do in iOS and Android, but it's going to have a title. So we'll do posts and comments. And then it'll have a path, which will be the posts path or the comments path. And then we'll also give it, for now, just an iOS image, which will be maybe, I think let's check out SF symbols. I think like an article or something. Letter, note, paper. What are we using in our existing project? Text.page. Okay, so we'll use that. And then for comments, I think we're using this like right bubble right. Okay, so this is the API that I want. I want a Hotwire native namespace with a tab bar component that passes in. Here we're just using an array of hashes. Like this could also probably be like, maybe this is actually, tab.new. That could be like a next level, but I want to get this working first. But the important thing is that we're calling render directly on it. And we'll get that with just one helper method in Rails here. So we'll close out this and we'll open up we'll pop into lib and we'll create a Hotwire native directory. I want it in lib because I want to pretend that Hotwire native tab bar lives in a gem or like as part of Rails or part of like a Hotwire native first party or third party package. So here we'll create the tab bar RB, and this will be Hotwire native tab bar. And this will have an initializer, which takes in a tabs, which will be an array. I guess we don't want empty array. We'll just set that to tabs as tabs, and then we'll have an attr reader for the tab. So now we can access those tabs externally. But what we really want to do is define two partial path. And if we look that up on active model, ActionPack uses this to find a suitable partial to represent the object. So we can use this, we can say to partial path and give it Hotwire native / tabs, right? Now we can go into our lib and create Hotwire native tabs.html.erb. And I'll open up that underneath. And here we're just going to, for now, we're just going to say, tabs go here. Because there's a little bit of configuration. I want to just make sure this works, right? So if I now open up localhost, it's not going to find the partial Hotwire native tabs. Well, first of all, I made a mistake. I forgot the underscore, like always with partials, I feel. So we'll rename this to underscore tabs. And we'll refresh here, and it's still not going to find it because it's only looking in our Rails app views and then also inside of Turbo Rails and Action Text. So what we're going to do is open up the application RB. Let's clean up a little bit. And we're going to give it, we want to tell it that we have like a new path for it to look at, right? So what we're going to do here is we're going to say, down at the bottom of this configuration, we're going to say action controller base prepend view path, and we're going to give it rails.root.join lib. And what this is giving us is an option now to any views can live in lib also. And the benefit of that is that once we have this thing, whatever we're building here, extracted out into a library or a gem, they would give that to us. And we wouldn't have to write this in our own code. So I'm going to restart the server over here on the other screen. And then we're going to refresh this page. And okay, cool. So we have tabs go here rendering as an H1. So we now at least know that our tabs HTML is rendering, right? So we have our tab bar renders to partial path, and then we have our Hotwire native helper. So already this is looking pretty good. We're taking advantage of the render. We're giving it a instance of a poro at this point, a plain old Ruby object, but we're just defining this one magic method that tells it that, hey, when you get rendered, render this partial down here. So tab bar, I think, is actually done until we make a better API, and this is not just an array of hashes. The Hotwire native helper probably done also. So what we're going to do here is we're just going to render out those tabs. Remember we had the adder accessor on it, or adder reader, right? So now we have the tab bar. If we do tabs.tabs, we get out our array of tabs. So what is going on here that we got? Why is tabs this magic, not ivar, but this magic local variable? It's because it's the name of this file down here. It is the tabs HTML. So I actually don't like that. I actually want this to be tab bar. So we can call tab bar.tabs. I think that makes a little bit more sense. If we refresh now, we're gonna raise because we didn't update our tab bar helper, or sorry, our tab bar component, I guess, if you will. So we'll just rename this to the tab bar helper to hotwire native / tab bar, and now we have our array of tabs. So we have this, right? We just now need to get this to the iOS and to the Android app. So we're going to build a bridge component that does this for us. We're going to build something that like you may already have in one of your apps, or don't know how I got a text from someone, but apparently my stream is frozen. Let's see what's going on here. I don't know. Sorry. If it's frozen, it's frozen. If you could text, or sorry, text, if you could write in the live chat if you're seeing it still. I'm still seeing it, but let's keep moving. Okay, so what we want to do is create this bridge component for the that will like kind of exist in the library, right? That we're the pretend building here. So we'll do that back in our editor, and we're gonna create this. I don't have the patience right now to go and oh, I see. The screen is frozen. Okay, I think that OBS crapped out on me there. I don't know how long that was frozen. I apologize, but what we have is this, and this is what we have written. We have our Hotwire native helper, which renders an instance of a tab bar that we've built over here, which is really just a wrapper around an array of hashes, and then the magic comes from toPartial where that then renders out this partial when we call render on it. And up next is us actually creating the bridge component to wire everything together. I'm just going to create it in JavaScript controllers because I don't want to deal with all of like the asset stuff of pulling from lib. But this would live in lib in like a real world situation. So we're going to create a tab bar controller. And our tab bar controller is going to import bridge component from hotwire native bridge, export default class extends bridge component. And this is going to have a static component equals tab bar. So we're going to keep our tab bar partial up at the top. And we now want to do, I like to use a meta tag because I know it's not going to render. Data controller equals bridge tab bar. Okay, so we have everything that we need on the server. Well, let's just do a, when it connects, this .send connect. We now have everything that we need on the server to kind of like test this and make sure that we are wiring something up to the client. Our first pressure test, if you will, or first sanity check, if you will. I'm sure I have a typo somewhere in here. So we're going to open up Xcode. We have that bare bones app that just loads those two tabs. Like, we don't want to write this in iOS. We're moving this to a component. But for now, we have them there so we could actually make sure to mimic what it looks like. So, okay, this is all working. So we're going to open up app delegate and we're going to import Hotwire native. And then here we're going to say Hotwire register bridge components, and we're going to have an array tab bar component.self. And it doesn't exist, so we're going to create that. And here we're going to import Hotwire native, and we're going to have a class tab bar component, which extends bridge component. And I'm just going to build. Cool. And then we should have an on receive. We're going to print out that message, and then we're going to override static non-isolated name is a string tab bar. Var. Override non-isolated static var string. Cool. So when we run this, we should see in the logs that we received this message because we're rendering it in the layout. And we did. Awesome. We received a message ID tab bar with some metadata. We actually received it twice because we're receiving it for each tab. So that will come back to bite us later. We'll talk about that in a sec. Okay. Now we want to get that JSON over the wire, right? So let's extend our tab bar component, and we'll have a struct called message data, which will be decodable, and that is going to have an array of tabs. And then our tab will be a decodable as well, which will have a name, a path, and an image. I think we called it tab bar helper. iOS underscore image. This is really like image name. So we're going to do a little enum, whoops, coding keys. So by doing an enum coding keys, we can override the name of the I always forget the actual. No, don't go away, ChatGPT. Swift coding keys. Coding keys. String, and then it inherits from string, but it implements the coding key protocol. Close. There we go. Okay, so what's going on here is that over the wire, we're receiving iOS image, right? We're getting that from here, iOS image, iOS underscore image. The stream freeze again? The stream froze again. So what I just built was, I don't know how long it's been frozen, but I just built out all of this component, decodable. So we have a message data, that has an array of tabs, and each of those tabs has a name, a path, and an image name. But we're parsing image name as iOS image from the server. That's what these coding keys enum does, because that's what we're setting at here. So that would give us the opportunity to do like Android image, and then iOS wouldn't be affected without us having to write, something generic like image name here without underscores and stuff. So what we'll do here, guard let data equal, and this is going to be of message data, equals message data else return. And then we'll print data.tabs.count. So we essentially want to make sure that we get 2 tabs coming out of this. If we run this now, we're not going to see anything because we're not sending anything over the wire. So we're not going to see, like it's going to just hit this else return statement and we're not going to get anything. What we need to do is apply that data here and then send it over the wire here. So we will have a data bridge tab bar tabs value. I think I like that because that will let us we can parse it as an array, and then all of the JSON and stuff we just won't have to worry about. But I do want to change this into a ERB. So we'll use tag.meta and then just give it a data thing here. So controller, and then bridge tab bar tabs value. And that's going to be our tab bar.tabs. And then here we're going to have a static values. And this is going to be tabs, which is an array. Now here we can say this tabs equals this tabs value, and then we can actually send it over the wire. So now we're wrapping that in like a tabs object or a hash, if you will, and we should be able to parse that out on the client, assuming all of this is right, which there's a low chance that's possible. But let's try. We're just going to go for it and run and hope that we just get a 2 that prints out twice. Nah, of course not. Okay, so we're going to set a breakpoint. What we're going to do is dive into data, and we're going to, you know what I can do? I can just turn on debug logging instead of actually doing this. So in our app delegate, we're going to say hotwire.config.debug logging enabled is true. And now it's actually going to spit out, hey, you messed up some coding. I expected a key. I got this, blah, 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 blah. There we go. Error decoding JSON. No value associated with the key coding key's name. Underlying error nil. So we got tabs pointing to an array, title, path, iOS image, path, title, iOS image. And it's saying it can't find name, which is odd because I see name there. So what's going on? We are getting metadata and then tabs, name, path. Oh no, I was, okay, so what we'll do now is, we'll just get rid of this for right now. Let's just do name and path. Let's just see if that works. Error decoding JSON. Can't find name. Ah. It's my fault. It's always my fault though. Title, not name, title. Let's run that again. Hey, we got a 2. All right, so let's hide that. Let's bring these back in and make sure that we're getting our image name correctly. What are you complaining about now? Does not conform to decodable. You sure? Oh, title. All right, let's see what we got. 2. Okay, so we now have our tabs coming over the wire. What we've done so far is like we now have a bridge component. Like that doesn't even do anything. This is all just like the dynamic parsing of it that we needed to build what we're trying to build here. And it's building blocky, but I'm hoping that by building it live, you can see that it's not that hard to build. But I don't know. We'll see. So what's next? We want to, or my stream is frozen once again. OBS, I thought you were the most reliable. How about now? Yeah, there we go. We want to actually show these tabs, right? We want to set the tabs. And this is where things get a little complicated and kind of platform specific because iOS is going to do this very differently than Android's going to do it. And if you remember, our scene delegate is the one that loads the tabs, right? So when the app launches, we're loading all of these tabs from that are hard coded right here. We don't want to do that. We want to load them dynamically from a page. So what I want to do is probably call in, either have access to this directly, which we could find by finding the controller, or calling into scene delegate, but then we have to put logic in the scene delegate to know, because what we're going to do is like, we're going to say, hey, load these tabs, tab bar controller, but this web view is going to fire, and then this bridge component is going to fire every single time a page is loaded. So if we have 2 tabs, we're going to get it twice. So we need some sort of like item potency to make sure that when we say, hey, load these tabs, they're not just infinite, getting caught in an infinite loop. Like we load the tabs, we get the bridge component. We load the tabs, we get the bridge component. So what I want to do is start really simple and say, if there are already the same number of tabs, don't load those tabs. And then we can move on to actually checking if the tabs are the same or not. And what we'll do is we'll just expose this tab bar controller from the scene delegate, or not even from the scene delegate, but we'll expose the tab bar controller because we know it's there in the bridge component. I'll show you what I mean by that in a sec. But to start, we don't actually want to load all of these tabs anymore. I just want to load I just want to load this one. I just want to load one. And why I want to load just one is because I don't want us to use this down here, but I do need to make a network request to the server to actually get the content of the tabs to display. So you can think of this as like, hey, each user has their own tabs, so we want to make sure they're logged in. Maybe the bridge component, like we don't use a bridge component for this particular example, and we get it from the path configuration or something. That could be pretty cool. But the path configuration doesn't reload every time you, unless you like manually reload it, and that's kind of icky. So I think what we'll do here is we'll load nothing. Yeah, we'll load the base URL. I like that. And then this will just be empty because we don't actually care. Like we're not going to see this, right? I don't even want to use an image. So you know what we'll do? We'll say tab bar controller dot tab bar is hidden equals true. So now when we load the app, all we're going to see is that index page. We're not even going to see the tab bar. So that actually is pretty nice because now when the app loads, it loads a screen kind of like as a, hey, what's going on? We could even get this potentially from a custom endpoint. That could be kind of cool. But for now, let's just load our root URL, our base URL, and then have the tab bar component do some stuff with the tabs. So we'll have a private var called viewController, which is the delegate destination as UI viewController. And then we'll have a tab bar controller, which will be a hotwire tab bar controller. And we'll grab that from the viewController.tab bar controller as a hotwire tab bar controller. Woo. And I have to import UI kit for this to work. Value of optional type must question mark. So we now know that we're always going to have a tab bar. Like, I will fix this before next stream, I promise. So I wrote this view controller, and I wrote this tab bar controller. And you've seen this probably if you've written any bridge components before. But this one is we're essentially saying, hey, grab me the tab bar controller. And I know that it's a hotwire tab bar controller because like it's the whole app. A little reaching into things that we probably shouldn't be privy to, but I don't mind because if the root view controller of your app changes from this, like way more things are going to have to change. So I'm okay with this kind of coexisting. So now that we have our tabs, we have a reference to our tab bar controller, we're going to say if the tab bar controller dot tabs dot view controllers dot count doesn't equal the data.tabs.count. So there's where we're kind of just really quickly making it item potent. It's optional, thanks. So if we set this if this gets fired more than once, we're not just like getting caught in that infinite loop like I talked about. And here we're going to say, okay, tab bar controller dot load, and we're going to load the data dot tabs. And now that's not going to work, right? Because tabs here is this array of tab. But what we need to load into our tab bar controller is an array of hotwire tab. So we need a way to map our tabs from tab, internal, to hotwire tab. So we can do that by saying let hotwire tabs equals data.tabs, and we'll map it, right? So we'll return a hotwire tab with the title of the tab.title, an image of the a UI image with system name, and then we'll grab tab.imageName, force unwrap that, and then what is it, URL? Is going to be our base URL appending path tab.path. Let's clean that up a tad. So now we're saying iterate over our tabs, which is just a primitive, like a POSO, an old Swift object, and create a hotwire tab from that. Because we're mapping over it, this is going to spit out an array from here, which is going to be hotwire tabs, which we can confirm. It's wrapped in hash or in square brackets. And then we can load our hotwire tabs. So before we had this code, we had this single screen with no tab bar at the bottom. The last thing we'll do is our tab bar controller dot tab bar dot set is hidden. Set hidden. False. Animated. True. So that will it won't slide up anymore because that was iOS pre-26. It will just kind of fade in. And it should load our two tabs from the server. Let's give it a go. It'll make that initial network request. It will complete, and it will not work. Beautiful. What's going on? Let's set a breakpoint right here. And let's step through some code. Okay, so we got here. That's already a good start. And so our data.tabs.count is 2. Our tab bar controller.viewControllers.count is 1. So that should work. Okay, let's step over that. So our hotwire tabs. We have two of them. Loading comments. Okay. And then we have a tab bar controller, right? Our tab bar controller is nil. Why would our tab bar controller be nil? There's kind of the downside of using these just like optional chaining here. They fail silently. They don't raise an exception, but if they're nil, like nothing happens. So let's take a look. Is our view controller nil? No. Our view controller.tab bar controller is nil. Well, that's interesting. Location. What's our delegate's location? Localhost 3000. So this is confusing to me because our scene delegate is loading this. Window.root view controller is tab bar controller. Tab bar controller load. I'm going to comment this out, the tab bar hidden part, and see if we get one tab or none. Okay, so we get the tab, and then do we? Okay, so the tab bar controller is present here. So let's Command Shift Y to continue. We now have our two tabs, so I'm wondering if, so now this one, so this is getting fired from loading localhost, so the root URL again. But this should just skip over. Tab bar control. Oh, okay. So this is interesting. The tab bar controller is nil, and tab bar controller.viewcontrollers.count is nil, which doesn't equal data.tabs.count. So what we want to do, I'm going to coalesce this into a 0. So this is saying, like, if you get nil and only nil, actually return 0. So now we're saying if the tab bar controller.viewcontrollers.count or 0 doesn't equal the tabs.count. And data.tabs.count will most likely never equal 0. But maybe it will. So actually that might not be super safe. So we'll do one more thing here instead, is that we'll make sure guard let tab bar controller. So that's now saying it assigns tab bar controller to tab bar controller, but it unwraps it safely, right? See how we're getting an error here on this question mark? Because it's no longer optional in these scenarios. Which means that this will now actually, if it gets to here, it will never be 0, or never be nil, because this will always have something. So let's give this a run and watch what happens. Oh, well, actually, no, that's cheating because we didn't. Let's do that. Unhide our tab bar on launch. Okay, there was a little bit of a UI jitter there, but let's just try. Let's just see what happens if we do false here. I don't know what's going on with that. Okay. We're gonna keep it like that. Tab bar controller dot tab bar is hidden equals false. Okay, so this is looking good. We have a. How long has that been frozen? It's really frustrating. I've just been listening to me talk and not seeing what I'm doing. Okay, so we talked about mapping. We talked about making it idempotent. And we are now guarding to make sure that we have a tab bar controller in place. Guarding to make sure we have a tab bar controller in place, make sure that we never get nil here, which was causing this to trigger because nil is never equal to a number. So this was always running, which was causing us to never actually load the tabs because this then was nil, which is not what we want. So if I run this now, we get our 2 tabs like we wanted. And I can dig into something here and we don't get any, discombobulation of the tabs or anything. But to make it even more powerful is we can now go into our helper here and we can add a 3rd tab. And we're going to add the same tab as above, right? So we now have 3 tabs, posts, comments, and then posts again. And when I refresh this page, I didn't rebuild the app. I didn't even, well, I have to deploy the server to get this going. But when I rebuild this, we now have 3 tabs across the bottom here. And a broken first one, but not sure why that happened. We'll dig into that. We're able to change it without actually making any changes to our native code. So that's where we start to get we start to see the magic of this, right? But if what I really would want to do in a scenario like this is change the icon or change the path or switch the order, right? So if I switch the order of these, I now have comments first and path and post second. We don't get an update because all we're checking is that the count is different. So 2 is equal to 2. So instead, we want to run a equals, essentially check if it's the same like this, right? So that's not our check anymore. So we're going to grab our Hotwire tabs and we're going to say, what we need to do is map the current tabs, which is going to be really hard because you lost my stream, I know. OBS. Okay. Before that gets out of hand, so an exercise for the reader here would be to go and run an equals and check the actual value of each of the Hotwire tabs. And then that would make sure that we have each tab could be different. Each tab is actually going to be different. That's what we'd want to do there to make sure that that works. Okay. Let's see. We have two ways we can go from this one. We can clean up this, but that's not really the point of it, right? We already have our API. Or we can try and move this to an actual library, so to speak, right? Get this all in lib, which might be just a bunch of me messing around. So maybe it's not the most entertaining, but it would be helpful to have. Yeah, I don't think that's actually worth it. Let's review what we have and then wrap up, because I think that this is a really good representation of what we're trying to build with Better Bridge components. And we can talk about what lives in your app and then what would live as a third-party thing or what have you. So it all starts from our layout application file. We'll talk about the code that you need to write if this was a real thing. You would have a helper that said render native tabs. You would write that helper, and you would probably write it in your Hotwire native helper here. You would write this function, this method as well. That'd be it. That's all you'd have to do. You would have a gem that would expose this Hotwire native tab bar class, Poro object, to you, that you could then pass in an array of these hashes. On iOS, you would probably do something like file add package dependencies and add a third party or something. For me, of that would give you this component, right? And then your app delegate would be the only place you'd actually have to reference that, where you'd want to register that tab bar component here from the, import third party library or whatever it's going to be called. That, of course, is if it doesn't get merged into Hotwire Native directly. If it's getting merged into Hotwire Native directly, then you would probably just have to call this. So from your end, it's actually like not much less work if it's in Hotwire Native. It's really just the fact that it is first party. So I think this is pretty cool. I think that like tabs are a really good example of something that you often change from your server and something that you want to experiment with as you get your first or second or third version of your app out. The purpose of this today was to show like how much of the bridge component architecture could we just like compress and expose. And I think where I'm going with this personally is that I don't know if these will ever exist in Hotwire Native. I don't know. Like I could push for them, but I just like don't know if that's something that we want to support. Maybe that's not the case anymore because now that we have the first party tab bar controller, we could. But what I definitely see happening is that my bridge component library, bridgecomponents.dev, right now you have to, let's look at the once you install it, right, like the npm package, the iOS component, the Android component, you then have to, let's look at the barcode scanner, right? You have to add, you can scan a barcode, iOS and Android. You have to add all this HTML to do it. But I feel like where I'm seeing this is that like this is exposed as a helper from Rails. So now this also has a fourth component that is like a Rails gem that would expand on this, that had the options in there, that had the writing out. I think that for the most powerful one would probably come from something like maybe the toast. I don't know. The form probably is the best bet. So for a form right now, like you have your form with, you have to add your data controller and you have to add this action manually, right? And then also add these things for all of the form to work, or write it all out in HTML. But I think so. I was showing that for a form component, your helper, your ERB needs to add like this huge chunk and then also these targets. But instead, what if like we hooked into form with a custom form builder and did something like Hotwire or native form with, and it knew that the submit button gets these targets, and it knew that these actions and this controller was added to it automatically. I feel like that's like a better approach for all this because it keeps you in Ruby even more. You don't even have to worry about like stimulus or wiring things up to stimulus. Maybe even the search component, because the search component now, as of a few days ago, we have this JavaScript event that's fired every time a search query is performed, which allows you to write your own custom controller and then extract out that query to do whatever you wanted with it. Make a fetch to your server or filter in line with JavaScript, call out to Algolia. So does like a gem help there? I don't know. Anyway, that's probably all we're going to do for today. I thank you for the folks that showed up. If you enjoyed this and want to see more, drop a comment in the chat or comment below on the live stream. I really enjoy these. I clearly need to get my act together with OBS not dropping the content of the screen. I apologize for that. I'm sure that was really frustrating. If you missed something, just comment below and let me know what you missed, and I'll send you the code or the screenshot, and you can go off from there. Thank you again, everyone. My name is Joe Mazzolati, and I write at mazzolati.com. Thanks, everyone. I will see you next time.